and welcome to Mastering Education, a podcast all about helping students learn better. Last episode, we focused on Tanay's journey from year 10 to year 11 into the GCSEs. And we promised then that we would dedicate a whole episode into digging into IB. But we thought we'd go one better and we'd invite another guest who has got the A-level journey and the A-level experience and go through that with him as well. So I'm delighted to also welcome Abdullah into the studio. Abdullah got a clean sweep of grade 9s in all of the core subjects. So that's English, maths and science. He also picked up grade 9s, let me get this right, in media studies, geography, and very respectable grades too in French and psychology. We're going to split the episode into 3 parts. So the first part is going to be all about A-level versus IB. Then we're going to move into exam preparation. And then we're going to finish off by looking at education after school. So looking at university applications, UCAS, and things like that. I'm going to start with Tanay and just find out how year 13 is going. How are you finding it so far?
Yeah, it's busy.
Yep.
Obviously, crunch time right now. It's September, so I've just submitted my personal statement. Uni admission test coming up in October, and then on top of that, obviously, I've still got to be getting good grades and learning in class. So it kind of does feel like it's probably the toughest 2 months for any year 13 student. The September, October, where you've got about 5 different things and you're kind of like managing spinning plates. But also the good thing is once I get to January, by then all I'm focusing on is the grades, which is, historically what I'm quite good at. So yeah, busy is the best way to describe it.
Good, very nice. And Abdullah, what about you? How have you found the start of year 13 so far?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Like Tanay said, it's busy.
Yeah.
Got a lot going on with admissions tests, and being an early applicant, you've got to get your personal statement and your UCAS application out of the way. But it's not too bad so far. Nothing too much at the moment that's going on. But yeah, it is probably the most stressful time so far.
Nice.
That I've experienced.
Cool.
In school.
And I sort of suppose that you're halfway through A-level and IB. You're probably a little bit further along because, of course, IB do their exams slightly earlier. Do you guys feel at this point, do you feel that you made the right decision in choosing the subjects that you chose? And also, what subjects did you choose, Abdullah?
So I chose physics, maths, further maths.
Okay.
And I couldn't be happier with that choice.
Really?
I think it's perfect for me. Physics and maths were the only subjects I really enjoyed at GCSE level.
Yeah.
So picking them was a natural step for A level. And then further maths is a recommended subject for what I want to do, which is engineering.
Okay.
So I went with that as well.
Cool.
But yeah, I'm perfectly happy.
Awesome. And you actually said something in the first episode about further maths. Have you guys ever spoken about because you don't do further maths, right?
So I do high level maths.
High level
is
maths.
Technically further maths.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I wonder actually, do you think is there any difference? Do you think between higher level maths for IB and then further maths for A level? Do you guys?
I think we were having a chat about it before we started shooting. I think the kind of one agreement we had is you start a topic, you have no idea what's going on, you revise, you understand it, you then start a new topic and you have no idea what's going on, and then that repeats. And I think the only difference I would say is further maths is harder. You cover harder topics, or the topics you do cover, you go into slightly more depth in further maths. However, in IB, you have a shorter period of time. So it kind of cancels each other out, whichever one you find easiest. And yeah, that's probably the main difference I'd say is probably just the time. IB is less, A-levels more, and then further maths is just that bit more in depth, I'd say.
Yeah. Abdullah, obviously you've chosen A-level. I wonder, was there ever did you know about IB? Like, did you have any kind of knowledge on that? Was it a choice to do A-level, or was it kind of like that was the only thing for you?
So I only found out what IB was from Tanay after he had picked IB. So I had no idea it even existed. And I only recently learnt more about it. So for me, A-level was the only choice. I wasn't going to do anything but that. Even if I knew that IB did exist, I wouldn't have picked it. It's not for me.
Right.
I wanted something more specific. I want something more specific. like I said, when I was in GCSE, I didn't like any subject except physics and maths. So picking an IB where I do multiple subjects on with a broader spectrum wasn't for me anyway. But at the time, I didn't know. No.
And I guess that's sort of a big toss up, isn't it? It's whether you spread yourself more thinly across more subjects, or you get the opportunity to like super dig in to the subjects that you really want to do at A level. Because are you doing 4 A levels, or have you dropped one and doing 3?
So I was considering doing 4, the 4th being chemistry, because for engineering, chemistry is quite a useful one. But I chose to just do 3 in the end because chemistry wasn't necessary. If I wanted to do chemical engineering, chemistry would be advised. But outside of that, and I knew I didn't want to do chemical engineering, then I didn't need chemistry. So I just went with 3.
And do you have any friends that do 4?
I think I have one, but he dropped his 4th recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think at your school, there is the option to drop the 4th one fairly early on. I think it's almost like 1 or 2 terms in, you can decide to drop it, right?
Yeah, you can. So at my school, everyone starts with 4. And then usually after the 1st or 2nd term, you can put in an application to drop the 4th. It's not always accepted.
Really?
Yeah.
So they can tell you no, you can't.
Yeah, they can. I think I really like the way our school does it from an A-level perspective. Obviously, it doesn't affect me, but hearing from my friends, starting with 4 is really good because sometimes you can think you're going to enjoy a subject and then you don't. So for example, at my school, you couldn't do politics or economics or philosophy at GCSE level. So obviously a lot of boys think, oh, I really enjoy watching the news, so I'm going to love politics and economics. And then they end up doing it and then it's just not what they thought it was going to be. And then obviously you're stuck in a position where you're a term in, you've only started with 3 subjects and one of them you really, really don't like. So then that's a bit of a dangerous place to be in. So starting with 4 gives you that safety net almost of, okay, I didn't enjoy this subject, but at least I've still got 3 that I'm good at and I enjoy, so I can just move to that. So I'm surprised a lot of schools don't always do that, because I think starting with 4 just, keeps your options open and then obviously allows you to specialize, like Abdullah said, if you want.
Interesting. So we, Abdullah, in the first episode with Tanay, we talked a little bit about the difference between year 11 and year 12. Obviously, you guys are both now in year 13. I wonder if you would mind just giving me an idea of how you found the step up from finishing GCSE and going into year 12. Did you find much of a difference in terms of things like workload or teacher demands and things like that? Did it feel like it was a big jump or not so much?
In some ways, I would say yes, because the content was a lot harder, especially doing further maths. We ended up finishing A-level maths in 3/4 of the year. So in terms of that, it was a big step up. But in terms of, I preferred it because I didn't like GCSEs, because I didn't like most of the subjects I did at all. So going into something that I genuinely enjoyed, which was physics and maths, even though the workload was quite a lot more, I preferred it because I didn't mind doing it. So it was a lot, but it didn't feel like a lot. It didn't feel like too much. Towards the end of the year, further maths became quite a bit more challenging because I was having to work a lot because I was trying to push for that A-star in the final end of year test. So it was a lot, but again, it didn't feel like too much because what I picked was perfect for me. And so I enjoyed, as much as you can enjoy working in school, I enjoyed studying for those exams more than I did studying for, I'm going to say English because I hated English.
Really?
Yeah. And it was one that I needed to work most for in GCSE. So I enjoyed it in that respect, but there was more work. But yeah.
We talked about this a little bit on the first episode about how you find the motivation to do work for a subject that you really don't enjoy. How did you do that? Like, how did you get over that hurdle, that barrier of just hating every minute of looking at this subject, but knowing that you've got to put the time in? Yeah. How did you get over that?
So for me, I sort of didn't let myself accept below the highest grade.
Okay.
So sometimes, for example, psychology or French, where I didn't get a 9, I still tried my best to push for that 9. Because I didn't want to accept anything lower than that. So even though I hated it, I had to put in, I just made myself, it's weird because I hated every second of revising for the subject, but I wouldn't let myself stop unless I got that grade 9. So English, I'm going to use as an example again. It was my weakest subject besides French, maybe. English was my weakest. And so I was putting in a lot more work for that than any other subject because I really just wanted that 9. And I knew that once I'm done with the exam, that's it. I don't have to ever do English again. So that was a big
motivator.
Big motivator, yeah. That's for a lot of subjects, actually.
Knowing that the light was the end of the tunnel was
one exam or a couple exams, and then I'm done with that subject forever. I don't ever have to write another English paper, or I don't ever have to study French again. Because I told Tanay on the way here, I do not like learning languages, not at all. It's not for me.
And that definitely, I think, might have been a reason to not do IB. Is it right that you have to do a language?
Yeah, so for IB, it's 6 subjects. You have to do a language, you have to do maths, you have to do a science.
Your worst nightmare, having to do a language.
You have to do English.
Yeah,
no, you're out.
You have to do I think it's probably, I don't have the correct term for it, but like a human science, which is like geography, economics, global politics or psychology. And then your last one is kind of a bit fluid because some people choose to do another science, which is quite a common option. For me, I chose to do another human science. So I did economics and geography, for example. I think I still don't like English. IB's not changed that. And I knew going into IB that English was going to be a struggle. And I think I've just kind of had to just suck it up and just get on with it. And I think sometimes you have to do that, especially for university applications. I think behind IB, I get a lot of people ask me, why would you choose to put yourself into a GCSE situation again? Because people ask me, my friends joke that I'm just doing my GCSEs again, which obviously is not true. I think I enjoyed the breadth of it, but I also think that universities know how difficult it is. Universities know how taxing IB is. You have to learn time management. You have to learn, how to cope with high level maths in like shorter amount of time. You have to cope with the volunteering requirements, 4,000 word extended essay. You've got 6 subjects, all of which, are almost pretty similar to A-level. So you're kind of doing the equivalent of like four A-levels, 4.5. And I think that universities appreciate that. So when they see someone who's done well in it, they know that they're probably an excellent student. And that motivated me a lot. I think there's something like in the world, 264 people get 45 out of 45, which is absolutely nothing. But then the figure for that for the number of straight A stars at A-levels a lot higher. And I was motivated to be one of those 264, and I still am, because I just think that'd be a really cool thing to have on a work CV in the future. And also I really do truly believe, obviously this is a bit of a political view, so I won't go into it too much, but I do think that IB is going to become the mainstream of education in the future. Rishi Sunak's already tried to implement something similar with, he kind of went down the road of wanting everyone to have to do maths past 16.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I think that what is actually going to happen is the more and more research that comes out and the more and more political leaders start to talk about the benefits of doing maths, learning a language, is the more people are going to realize that IB is almost the, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it's the most perfect educational model for students who want to become talented and disciplined in the future. IB I really think is a really good way to do that. However, Abdullah is doing engineering, which as he mentioned, is specific. And for people wanting to do things specific, I don't think IB is the right choice, because it's going to be an absolute waste of his time learning to speak French when he knows he wants to be a civil engineer. Because when is he going to need French?
Yeah, unless he goes and works in France.
Of course. But what I'm saying is,
I'm willing to take that sacrifice if I have to learn the language.
I think for things like that, I think the A-level was the best choice. So.
Did you find, Abdullah, that the level of homework and the demands from teachers changed much when you went from GCSE to A-level? I'm just trying to sort of wonder, because we spent a lot of the first episode talking about that jump, but you, it seems to me, kind of felt that the end of your GCSE and the amount of work that you had to do to pushing yourself to get those grade 9s actually prepared you really well for A-level and the demands and the workload for that. Do you feel you kind of walked into A-level and didn't feel it was too much more challenging than GCSE?
In terms of not the content, but in terms of the workload in class, yeah, I did feel that it wasn't too big of a difference. In terms of the homework, I think there was actually less homework in A-level, just because they expect you to be more independent. They expect you to, if you want an A-star, you need to put in the work at home to get an A-star. In GCSE, it was a lot more, I'm going to give you this homework, you have to get it done, and then we'll talk about the score afterwards. Even sometimes you would get homework in A-level for maths or further maths, for example, and they'd say, if you do it, put it on my desk. It's not compulsory. Lots of people wouldn't do it, but then lots of people would also cram for the exams towards the end of the year, struggling to get the grades. So you get less homework, but it's not compulsory when you do get homework. In physics, we like to get a lot of homework. Well, I don't like it, but we get a lot of homework. It just comes down to whether you're willing to put in the work. They expect you to be a lot more independent, homework or not. Yeah.
And do you feel that your personality as a student fits quite nicely into that, of the fact that it's more independent learning?
Absolutely, yeah. I find that in a school setting, when they're teaching you a specific syllabus every single day, I prefer to just go home. Ignore the voice crack. I prefer to just go home or in class, focus on what I need to focus on. I'm not a big fan of being in a class setting, being taught with the rest of the class every single day. So I prefer the independent side of things.
Yeah,
a lot
I
more.
Definitely second that. I think one of the things that I've quite enjoyed with the IB is that it's not really the homework that is the issue, but let's say, I'll try and put it in numbers, but if you've got, 2 hours of homework tends to be your classic for A-level and IB. How you spend those 2 hours or 3 hours, probably more likely for IB, is kind of what you want to get out of it. So, we all have subjects we're really strong at. And there'll be some nights where you get the homework done in literally 20 minutes. But then the difference between a good student and a not so good student is that a good student would then do extra work, which has not been asked from the school. And they'll say, okay, I'm going to look into the next topic, or I'm going to do some more exam questions. I'm going to do a past paper. And I think at A-level and IB, teachers expect you to be doing that. So they say, yes, I've not set you any homework this week, but I still expect you to be doing work. And while I think sometimes people don't explicitly say that, and then people realize halfway through, oh, the teachers have been expecting me to be doing work. I've not been doing that. And I think that's the difference with GCSE. GCSE is very monotonous in the fact that if you do X assignments, you will probably get X grade. It's as easy as that. You don't really need to worry about going above and beyond, because why would you go above and beyond when the teacher's going to spoon feed you everything? So I think, echoing Abdullah's point, you have to be motivated and enjoy your subject. And when you enjoy your subject, that extra work that you do doesn't feel like work. Like, for example, for me, that's economics. When I do economics work outside of the homework, it doesn't feel like work because it's generally interesting. And, unfortunately, I don't have that with English, which is probably why I have to work harder for the English, and I have to ask the teacher for more work, because I know that if the teacher doesn't give me work, I'm not going to go seeking out English work. Why would I do that to myself? Sure. So it's a really fine line between the two things. But yeah.
Did you have any mock exams or anything at the end of year 12?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have mock exams at the end of year 12? Okay. Did you guys approach it any differently when you compare, say, the GCSEs? Did you approach revision any differently for year 12 exams, Abdullah?
No. The way I revise has always been exactly the same. It's just been, I've got the textbook containing every bit of information I need. I'll go home after class, I'll look through the textbook to refine the knowledge, and I'll do a bunch of questions on that topic. It's always been like that, and I don't see it changing for this year. I would say near exam time, it changes a little bit. GCSEs, I don't remember doing too many past papers for GCSEs. I don't know about you, Tanay.
I did quite a few.
Okay.
You did your speed runs with mum.
Yeah, I used to do the past papers orally. But yeah, I'll let you finish your point.
Maybe I'm misremembering. I don't. To be honest, I don't actually remember too much from GCSE, from revising for GCSEs or preparing. I know I did it, but I don't remember too much about it.
It clearly didn't make a difference to your results whether you did past papers or not.
For these AS levels, I did AS levels papers because that's basically what we had for our end of year exam. I did a lot of them. And just going back to your past question, the last question about the workload from teachers, I felt like it really changed around that period where you're trying to do past papers, because so many people are at different points of whether they know the content or not. And you might know the content but might want to do a past paper, or you might not know content and someone else might want to do a past paper. So that sort of independent study really comes into it with that. But yeah, I don't think it changed too much between GCSE and A level or AS level in terms of revision.
What about you?
I think some people expect that IB is just going to be the same as GCSE revision because you're still taking 6 subjects and you have to balance it. For me, I had to spend 70% of my time with high level maths. So already 100% of my time, I'm already down to 30% because I purely had to spend that much time at high level maths to get a good mark, not even to get an exceptional mark. So it left me with limited time to revise 5 subjects, which is quite daunting. And I think the year 12 exams are really awkward. I'm not sure if you agree with this, Abdullah, but you want to do past papers, but you've not covered enough of the content to do a full past paper. So what you kind of end up doing, which is a bit frustrating, is you open a past paper and then you can't do the first 10 questions, but you can do the last question, but you've not learned enough to do the question before. So it gets really messy and you end up kind of flying through a past paper, which is out of 100 marks and you've only done 10 marks worth of questions. So I think that's where you've got to search up topic specific questions rather than just do past papers. And also you don't want to kind of waste the past papers so early on in the course because you're really going to need them for the second year. In terms of year 12, I think the easy point with the importance of the year 12 mock exams and does your mindset change. The year 11 mock exams, or the year 10, I assume, the year 10 mock exams don't mean a massive amount for your career, but the year 12 mock exams is where your predicted grades come from, which determines which universities you can apply with, how successful you're going to be, your chances of getting into the universities you want to. So year 12 mock exams are like 10 times more important. You know, some people even say they're more important than your actual exams because obviously when the university makes you an offer, it tends to be lower than what you've applied with. So I think just having that in the back of my head, I remember what I did for the push-up story, another strange thing that I did. I got a piece of paper and I wrote the universities that I wanted to go to, and I wrote the score that I needed to go to them, and I stuck it in front of where I do my work in the study. So anytime I was kind of like getting bored, I'd look up and I'd see those grades and I'd see the admission statistics of like 9%, for example, for Oxford. And then that would drive me to get back on with revision. And then that kind of leads nicely into how do you revise for a subject that you don't like. There is no special tip. You just got to do it and get over it. That's what I did. And then obviously I did the 7 push-ups, had to do it.
7 because that's
7
the IB,
was the highest score.
But it was 9 push-ups for GCSE.
So that was good. Yeah.
Did you have any sort of weird tips or tricks that you kind of established for yourself in revision?
No, none at all, to be
just
honest.
got it done.
I'm really curious
just get it done.
I'm really curious about this push-up story because I don't think I've heard this before.
So I'll explain it in IB context, but basically, so in IB, the highest score you can get is 7 points. And it's probably worth actually explaining what 45 points is made up of.
Yeah, please do.
So you do 6 subjects, 3 high, 3 standard, 3 high are the important ones, the ones that universities tend to look at. And your 3 highs tend to be kind of the equivalent of maybe an A level and a little bit more. And then your standard levels are kind of a little less than A level. And that's how it kind of, that's the best way to put it into terms, in A level terms. And so the highest score you can get is 7. So obviously many of you are now realizing that adds up to 42, not 45. So those 3 points are then made up of a theory of knowledge essay, which is, I don't even know how to explain it, and I'm doing it right now.
Is it the 4,000 word one?
No, so you have to do a 4,000 word extended essay on anything of your choosing. So I've submitted mine. Mine was the impact of the influx of Syrian refugees on Turkey's socio-economic kind of landscape. And then you've got your CAS, which is your volunteering. And then that TOC essay, I think the best way to describe it is it's a bit of like kind of philosophy. It's kind of branded as thinking about thinking. So it's a very difficult subject to, it's not as easy as just looking at an essay criteria and thinking I'm going to hit those criteria points, because it's so individual, you know, it's so ambiguous as to what is good. And you kind of have to, you've just got to just hope that it kind of all comes together really for those 3 points.
And do you get any specific lessons on that?
Yeah, you do. You get specific TOK lessons. So that's how it comes up to 45. So for my mocks, obviously 7 is the highest you can get. So the night before all of my mock exams, I would do 7 push-ups to ingrain the number 7. And that's what I did for my GCSEs, but it was obviously 9 push-ups.
So it weren't as hench.
No, I wasn't as big after the mock exams, unfortunately. But yeah, that was a strange thing that I just
That is
did.
interesting.
Yeah.
But no, nothing for you.
No.
Abdullah just shows up, gets a 9, goes home.
Yeah, winning.
So I was honestly less stressed in the exam period than I was running up to it, because I was in preparation for the exams. I made sure that I worked hard enough to be confident by the time the exams even came around. So by the time my first exam, which was RE, came around, I was way less nervous for the exams than I was a week or 2 beforehand. I actually think in the exam period, I think it was chemistry, if I remember correctly, I didn't look over anything to do with chemistry in the whole exam period, because I was just that confident before the exam, because I had put in the work before the exam. So I actually wasn't nervous during the exam period, weirdly enough. I was more nervous beforehand, so I didn't have anything like that to sort of de-stress, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd have to second that. I think obviously, you know, me getting sweaty doing push-ups makes me seem like I was stressed, but I was actually, you know, pretty calm. And even in the year 12 mock exam, I mean, it's kind of like a little mantra almost, but I kind of just kept telling myself that if I put 120% into my revision, I don't really care what the results are, because I know that I've worked as hard as I can. And if the results aren't the greatest, then maybe that's not what God has in store for me. Maybe there's just other things. And so that kind of 120% was kind of my motto. And when you walk into an exam knowing that you've worked as hard as you can, you actually kind of like, you're at peace with it almost. And whatever the result is, you at least think, you know, I really did my best for this. And obviously Abdullah and myself came out with pretty strong predicted grades. So it's just having that motivation to keep revising, keep doing past paper questions, not get too complacent. And I think that's easier at year 12 than it is at year 10, because at year 10, you're a bit less mature. At year 10,
you've been through it once. In year
exactly.
10, yeah.
And also in year 10, you know, the mocks aren't as important, but you know, you've got that UCAS looming over you when you're doing your year 12 mocks, and you know that the results you get is going to determine what you apply to, which universities. You know, there are a lot of boys, you know, a lot of people I've heard from, not just in school, but who had Oxford applications, and they got so caught up in the dream of going to Oxford, they actually forgot to study. And then year 12 mocks came around and they didn't get the grades they needed, and then they couldn't apply to Oxford. Yeah. And it's game over, right? So you have to use that university thing as a motivation, but don't let it eat you up. Because instead, if you're, you know, sitting on your laptop searching through which Oxford college you'd like to spend your time at, rather than doing your revision, you won't be going to any Oxford college. And that's it sounds really mean and really harsh, but unfortunately that is how it is. And I'm glad that I was able to kind of, I think I found that balance. And that's obviously been harder this year, because now I've got the grades. It's pretty easy to get complacent.
Yeah.
But that was kind of, you know, finding that balance is so crucial for those people aiming for the real top universities.
So we've talked quite a bit about predicted grades. There's quite a few things to cover there. What are your predicted grades that you've got?
44 out of 45.
Big smile, loving that, Abdullah.
AAA star.
AAA star.
Yeah.
I want to come back to something that you said, Tanay, where you said that how important the year 12 mocks are, because that's what universities are going to make an offer based on, right? Do you guys think that's fair? You said, Tanay, that year 12 mocks are hard to revise for because you've only covered so much of the content. So past papers aren't as helpful. Yet, so we already know that they're quite hard to revise for. And yet you've got, as you say, this thing looming over you, which is, it's so important because my university application depends on it. Do you guys think it's fair that there's so much pressure on the year 12 mocks because those are the grades that the universities are going to look at? What do you guys think?
I think it is fair, because, well, how we did it in our school, I don't know how it is in your school, but the predicted grades were based on all the tests in the year. It wasn't just one test.
Okay.
If it was it was primarily based on the end of year test because that covered all the content, but it was also took into account all our other tests. If it was one test, I think I would be less happy with it because you can easily have a bad day on a test. You can easily get unlucky, or there's a lot of pressure on these tests because of the UCAS application. So some people might not do as well as they could have. But taking into account all the other tests that we did in the year, I think it's fair, because it shows how hardworking you are, regardless of the importance of the test. My dad likes to say to me, you should be prepared for a test no matter what time of the year it is. And I think if you think of it like that, you need to stay on top of the content throughout the whole year. If you stay on top of the content throughout the whole year, then for every test that comes up, and especially the end of year tests, you won't be stressed in the exam because you have spent so much time over it, covering it throughout the year, that when it comes down to the actual exam, you're a lot more confident in it than you were maybe in one of the other mocks in the year. So I think by using your exams in year 12 for predicted grades, I think it's fair, because it really shows a lot about your work ethic and your general performance for universities to take into account, alongside your GCSEs as well, which show a long history of how hardworking you are. So yeah.
I think I'll raise, I completely agree with everything Abdullah said, and that would have been my answer word for word. And I think I also want to draw importance on how the predicted grade is actually calculated, because it's very different at every school. There are some schools that are more lenient, some schools that are more positive, more kind of, more kind of less strict in a way. And there are some schools that are like, if you want an A star, you have to get an A star. And I think that's why the top universities have admission tests, because it's so easy for someone to get predicted grades that they're not actually going to get. And I think that's probably a more dangerous place to get predicted grades that are too low, because if you've got 43, let's say, in the IB, but you deep down and your teachers know that you're probably only going to get 36, you're now applying to universities as someone who you aren't. And you're going to reach a point where you're not going to get into any of the universities, and then you're going to end up in clearing, when you would have felt a lot better if you got 5 offers from 5 universities you can actually attain.
Got a good shot at.
Yeah. And I think schools have to be they have to be optimistic. They have to be cautiously optimistic that he's been on an A all year. He got an A in the end of year exam, but I think he's going to really cope with the second year. And I think he's going to start working harder. And I think we'll give him an A star. And I think that balance is it's not the same at every school. It's going to be different. I had a friend in London who she got 22% in her end of year maths, and she got predicted an A star. I missed a 6 in high level maths by a single mark, and they didn't give me a 7. So they only gave me a 6, which I obviously put up for review and it got rejected. I'm really glad it did, because I actually think, again, like the drama, it's nice to have one that I didn't get. And I think I'd much rather the way my school does it, with that being strict but cautiously optimistic, and not giving you grades which are so out of your reach that you're literally applying to university as a different person. That's where GCSEs are so important. Because if, university, the first thing they'll do when they see your application, they'll say, okay, he's got a 44 out of 45 in IB, but what did he get at GCSE? And then if they see 6s and 7s, they'll think he's probably been over. And I'm not saying that you don't need to work hard in year 12 and it doesn't matter. Of course it matters, but that GCSE that's your evidence almost. That's your way of getting into the door, and then having great predicted after that, even if it's, 38 or AAA, at least they think, yeah, but he got really well in GCSE, so AAA probably means he's definitely going to get that. And I think that's really important. And I wish there was a way to equalize the way they give predicted grades, maybe one national body that decides how they do predicted grades. But the truth
or if they were externally marked,
exactly.
maybe,
but I just think that would never happen. And I think that's why it's so important that, like Abdullah said, it should be done on all the tests that year, because we all know people who've been on an A star all year, and you think he's the best economics student I've ever seen, and then in their end of year exam they end up getting a B. It's not fair to give him a B because he clearly is an A-star student. He had a bad day. And that's why when you go into year 12, it's not the kind of thing where you switch on in May because you've got exams next month. You've got to be switched on from September. Because if you're walking to an exam knowing I'm an A-star student, that's so much better than walking to an exam saying, I usually get a B, but I really want to get an A-star. So I've got to do really well in this test, because that's a lot of pressure. And that kind of, that evidence that you are a good student needs to show to universities. And the only way you can do that is, like Abdullah's dad say, approach every test exactly the same, no matter how important it is and no matter what time of year it is.
Always be prepared, basically.
Yeah.
And work hard to always be prepared.
Yeah.
Put in the extra work and then you will be always prepared.
Yeah. How I see it is that GCSEs are the start point of how well you're going to do. Then you have year 12, your exams and predicted grades, they sort of back up your GCSEs if you've carried on. And then if you have an admissions test, that sort of makes everything concrete where, these predicted grades match, these GCSEs match, and he seems like he's got a good knowledge of the subject. And in terms of, you just said that, what did you say? You said that when it comes to the exam, thinking about, I need to get an A, which is a lot of pressure if you're sitting at a B.
Yeah.
I think if you approach every exam with the mindset that I need to do as best as I can in terms of revision and the exam, and not place more importance, you can place more importance on the end of year exam, but not place less importance on earlier exams. Then it gets to the point where when it comes to the final exam, you won't be thinking, I need to get an A because I'm sitting at B. You'll be thinking, I've gotten A's or I've gotten B's confidently. I know I can easily get that grade. And then maybe if you're sitting at a B and you need an A, well, hopefully you would have worked enough over the course of the year throughout every exam to be confident that, I know I'm capable of an A now. Each test is a progression over the last one. So you approach the next test with the last test as just in the back of your mind, knowing what you need to work on. So when you're revising for the next test, you cover what you missed in the last test, but you stay on top of the last test as well. So then by the time the next test comes around, you're ready in every way that you could be. And the main thing is just staying on top of things, and you'll be fine.
Great. Cool. So we've started talking quite a lot now about really preparing for life after school. How have you both found the process of applying to universities? Obviously, some universities will do entrance exams, as you've mentioned. The majority will be UCAS applications. How have you both found that?
I think from my perspective, it's been pretty difficult because of the academic, the rigorous nature of the IB. I haven't had as much time to do extracurriculars. So I've when I've sat down to my personal statement, I've thought, I've got great grades, but I'm not sure what else I have. And that was quite a scary place to be. And I'm really glad that I spoke to the director of IB at my school, and I said, look, I've got good grades. And this was at the start of year 12. I had this conversation. I said, my aspirations are Oxford. let's assume that I'm going to get good grades at the end of this year and I'm going to have good predicted grades. What other things do I need to do so that my personal statement is airtight, in conjunction with the grades that I have? And he basically said, you need to start reading around the subject. You need to start finding niche areas you're interested in. You need to start not only reading books, because a lot of people just read books, but you need to read books, take notes on them, develop your own opinions, disagree with the author. Just read a book, sit down on a Google Doc and put, I think the author is wrong, and see what you say, because that is what the universities want to see. They don't want to see, oh, I read this book about capitalism. It was a great read. They want to see, what did that book make you think? Did you agree with it? Did you not agree with it? Did you think the author, portrayed capitalism in a good way, or do you think there should be reforms to capitalism? Did that book lead you anywhere? Did that book lead you to an article, which then led you to an essay, and then you wrote something? That's what they want to see, that kind of chains of evidence. I think
what you take from the further reading rather than just reading. Exactly.
And that's what they want to see. And I think that was, I'm not a great reader, so that was probably my biggest challenge. I had to really force myself to read. And I got through, I think I've only mentioned one book on my personal statement, but what I did mention was a lot of Financial Times articles, journal articles, scholarly papers, lectures that I attended, because those are things I enjoy doing. I'm not that great with sitting down and reading a 500-word book. And that's important. The other thing that I think is really important, and again, this is a really weird piece of advice because people can go way too into it, is that you have to research universities. You have to research the course, because so many people say, I want to do economics and maths at LSE. And I say, oh, cool. And then I ask them why. And they don't have an answer for me. They say, it's LSE and I like economics, but there needs to be some sort of reason. You need to look in depth. Would you like the university? Do you like the area it's in? But then look at the course with a critical eye. What modules do they offer? How do they examine, your impact? Some people really like big exams at the end, which, decide everything. But other people like small exams throughout the year. So universities are different with that. Are there modules which allow you to do what you want to do? Are there certain areas that you want to explore in more depth? Are there certain professors that you'd like to work with because you've read their work? That's the kind of detail that you need to, know your university courses with. And also, I know we're going to talk about this later, but when it comes to choosing a college, that's also the kind of detail that you need to know about the colleges. And really finding your motivation for this course. I think I was talking to a boy and he asked me at the start of year 12, he was one of the older boys, he was a year 13, and he said to me, what universities are you thinking of? And I said, yeah, Oxford. And he said, why? I didn't know.
You didn't know then, but you know now.
I didn't know then. I said, I've got pretty decent grades. He said, yeah, but why Oxford? Lots of people have got pretty decent grades. And I couldn't answer the question. That's when I knew that I had massive naivety in the whole process. And I had absolutely no idea why it was Oxford. And I think it's really important to find that, don't want to sound too spiritual, but find that calling almost from a university.
Interesting. What about you? How have you found the process of UCAS and things like that?
So I had a very similar experience with the first half of what Tanay said. When it comes to reading around the subject, and I hate reading, I picked up a book that I found about engineering, but I tried to fine tune what type of engineering it was beforehand through a bunch of research. I found that it was civil engineering particularly. So then I found a book to do with civil engineering and structures. And I read that, and I actually kept a notes page open on my phone every time I'd read it, labeled uni personal statement. And anytime I'd find something I found interesting in the book, I would note it down and I'd bookmark the page. Then when it came to writing a personal statement, I had all of that ready that I could either research further into or just put down what I took from that. And it ended up creating a personal statement that I'm very happy with. I didn't have too much outside of reading that book in terms of what I'd read, but I'd watched a little bit and read that book. But because I went into it thinking, what will I be able to take from this? I ended up with something that I was very happy with in terms of the personal statement, and I'm very satisfied with what I did. Even though I don't enjoy reading, I still did find the book interesting, but just reading isn't for me. And then the second half, when it comes to knowing your university and what universities you're applying to, I agree with the side of researching a university. But for me, when it comes to, you said I didn't know why I wanted to go to Oxford. For me, honestly, the reason I want to go to Oxford is it's because it's the best you can do. It's the biggest challenge. So honestly, I'm willing to, if it's, say, multiple exams throughout the whole course versus one exam at the end, even if I prefer one, I would rather make that sacrifice for me personally and try and take that bigger challenge and reach in my opinion, the best place I could go to.
So you're motivated by the challenge to go to that
Yes.
particular university rather than having a particular reason within the university that makes you.
I feel like that's a theme in GCSEs and A-level for me. With GCSEs, when it comes to the subject I don't like, if a grade 9 is available, I'm still going to work at the subject to try and get that grade 9 because that's the best I can do. I'm trying to succeed in that. When it comes to A-level, I do further maths, and in further maths, you get to pick either further statistics, further pure, or further mechanics. Everybody, including the teachers, say further statistics is easiest, and only 1 or 2 people pick further mechanics each year. But I've chosen further mechanics because not only do I enjoy it, and I really hate statistics, but also I'm not bothered that everyone's saying it's really hard because I'm willing to put in that work to try and get that A-star. I think never limit what you choose in terms of university or grades or what you're studying because it's a challenge. I don't see the point in that. So, but in terms of knowing why you want to go to university, to be honest, Oxford was just the biggest challenge, and it's the best I can do. So that's why I want to go there.
Great.
Alongside the fact that it's an amazing place in terms of, it's beautiful.
It is. It is. What makes a good personal statement, in your opinions?
I think the personal statement is it's so mean. It's just so mean because you've got 4,000 characters, including spaces, to give a snapshot into universities of who you are in an academic sense. And it's a really, really hard thing to do. I think we can all agree on that. So I'll just start with that. Personal statements are cruel. It's horrible. Yeah, it's
But
horrible.
at least everyone's got to do them, right?
okay,
So in a way,
yeah.
it's kind of fair.
So I think the most important thing is, number one, it has to be personal. I see so many, because obviously you have access to old personal statements and stuff. And I see quite a few, and I just look at them and I just think, I have no idea about this person. What are they actually like? What is their personality like? Because it doesn't show, and you need to show that. What kind of person are you? And I think that comes from, and a good rule of thumb is just, if you've got 2 sentences in a row and none of them have I in it, then delete it because it's not important. Because if it's not about you, no one cares. Like, a lot of people introduce a book and say, I read book X. The book was about this and explained this. That's great, but you don't need to explain that. You should start with, I read book X, I found the book, or I disagreed, or just go straight into it. Because also 9 times out of 10, this is being read by a professor who's probably read that book and probably knows it like the back of his hand. So you don't need to, it's almost a bit patronizing to explain the book to him, because I'm or him or her, I'm sure they know what the book is. And I think it's a really, it has to be about you, and it has to be niche. There's in economics, there's this book called it's called Freakonomics, and everyone puts on their personal statement. Every single person who applies to economics puts down their personal statement. And the first thing my economics teacher told me is, you will not read this book and you will not put it on your personal statement, because as soon as you do that, you are exactly the same as every other applicant applying. So you have to find a book which is a bit niche and a bit outside your general scope. For me, that was a book by a Greek economist, Yanis Varoufakis, and it was a book that my dad just happened to pick up at the train station when he was coming home, and I absolutely loved the book. And then that book led to me writing an essay, which then was published externally, and then that essay led me to another book, and then it all kind of fell into place. And I think finding that what what is it that you want to do that no one else wants to do, almost in a way? And they want to see some kind of, in your personal statement, it's not only about university, because you can get into the, the rut of going, I am good for this university, I have this quality, but also you need to think big picture, think long term. What do you want to do after university? And almost, it's a bit of a different way of thinking, but why does the university want you? In 50 years time, why are they going to say, yeah, he went to our university? So what is that? So for me, I ended my personal statement talking about how I really want to work in social policy. And in particular, I want to work in Latin America because I do higher level Spanish. So I want to use my Spanish along with the skills I learned at university in philosophy, politics, economics, and international social and public policy. And I want to use those skills with my Spanish to go and help Latin America, which is already becoming a massive global superpower. Their access to natural resources, and this is now sounding a bit economics-y, so I won't go into it too much. But it's such an interesting continent with so much culture, and sustainability is really big there. And I just think it's so interesting as a kind of microcosm of what developing nations could look like. And that was my niche point, because I was then thinking not many students are going, and I could be wrong, but not many students are going to have high level maths, high level economics, and high level Spanish. That's a very rogue IB choice. There's no one in my school who does that mix. And that's what sets me apart. What I hope is going to, is that, I'm hoping that when people read my personal statement, they think he's going to be a good fit for this university, but he's also thinking long term. He's not just limiting himself to, I want to get to this university and then my life is done, I'll be happy. He's then thinking, but after university, I want to go to Latin America. And you have to show that kind of, that
forward thought.
Yeah, that kind of forward outlook, and no, I'd be interested to know what Abdullah how he approached his. Yeah.
So for me, I think the most important thing is knowing what course you're going to pick. So for me, when I knew I was going to apply to Oxford, I researched their course and found out that their engineering is general engineering and not specialized from the start. Whereas all the other universities I applied to are specialized from the start. So I had to know what I wanted to do in terms of type of engineering for the other universities, which was civil. But I also had to craft my personal statement to not just talk about civil engineering, because Oxford isn't just civil engineering. So I think knowing what courses you're applying for is important for structuring your personal statement. But I also, if the course you're going to do is general, like engineering at Oxford, you still need to find a more detailed topic that you have an interest in.
Mm-hmm.
So like Tanay said, find a niche almost. Not necessarily a niche, but something more specific that you're interested in. So my brother, when he applied to university, when he applied to Oxford, he spoke specifically about waves in physics because he applied for physics, and stuff he had read about outside of class about waves that helped him deepen his understanding. And I think from what I've read and been told, universities value that more, especially top universities. They value it more because it shows that you genuinely have an interest, rather than I read about this and this and this from different parts of the spectrum because syllabus, because I just like the subjects. They want to know what you're interested in. Like Tanay said, it's important to make it about you. So in my opinion, of course, I can't know if it's going to be successful or not yet, but
neither, by the way, don't trust my advice.
But in my opinion, I think it's a good idea to use lots of, or as a few anecdotes to try and set a background and a setting for who you are and why, what's caused you to actually like the subject. You can't just say from a young age, I've liked this subject, and then go into explaining a book you read. So using multiple sentences with I, or, in that first person is good. My sister, when I sent my personal statement to my sister, she came back to me changing loads because I did not use I or my enough. So she said, you're not making it personal enough. It's to the book's about this led to this explained this, but it doesn't talk about why I found that good, why I found that interesting. So that is a key point about personal statements, because they want to know you and why you're good for the subject, not just that the subject's good.
Cool. We've both mentioned Oxford a lot. I think we should probably just dig into that a little bit further. So how do you guys feel about the difference in application process to Oxford and other universities? And how are you both preparing? First of all, what is the Oxford application process and how are you each preparing for it? Tanay?
Yeah, so probably before we start, it's probably important to note that me and Abdullah have not got into Oxford yet.
Sure.
So obviously, this is all kind of coming from people applying for Oxford who've got pretty decent grades. So I think we'll have a very interesting thought process behind it, because obviously, I hear a lot of, I got into Oxford and they make it sound so easy. It's not easy to get into Oxford. So I'm applying to philosophy, politics and economics, the Prime Minister's degree, as they call it. And the reason behind that is I love politics, I love economics, and I genuinely believe that philosophy is that kind of intersection between the two subjects. The Oxford application process for me, I have to submit my application early doors, and I've got an admissions test, the TSA section 1 and section 2, which I will sit on the 24th of October. 30% of the people who sit the TSA will then be given an interview, and 30% of the people giving an interview will then be given an offer. So, and this is all done. So my TSA exams in October, the interview, if I get one, will be December, and then I'll find out by the first week of January whether I've been successful or not. For me, I think the most important thing with an Oxford application, and I will touch on the point, for me, Oxford is a bit different to what it is for Abdullah, as we discussed before the podcast. It's you have to want it. You can't do Oxford half-heartedly, because it's really frustrating. There's nothing worse than doing, last week I did a TSA paper and I just did really badly in it, and I wouldn't have got in if that was the score that I came out with. And you've just got to bounce back up, and you've just got to keep going. You've got to get the best grades in school. You've got to be the best student in every one of your classes. And on top of that, you've got to be reading. You've got to have a killer personal statement. You've got to get the highest scores in the admissions test, and you have to be able to present yourself well in the interview. You have to do all of that. It's not easy. There is an element of kind of, I hear people saying it's a bit like a lottery. The harder you work, the luckier you'll get. And I think that's true. But also you can't escape the feeling that there is a bit of, if it comes up, the one thing you have to remember about Oxford is all the students have the exact same grades as you. So you're at the starting point. Having straight 9s at GCSE and 44 out of 45 at IB puts me on the map. It doesn't put me ahead of anyone. It just puts me on the map. That admissions test is what puts me ahead of people. And then the interview, again, is under my control. So you have to really use those and really be determined to spend Sunday where you may rest doing admission test, doing admissions test practice rather than, I don't know, going to a football game or whatever it is.
How long's the paper?
So it's an hour and a half the first section, and then half an hour the second section, so 2 hours in total. And you have to be willing to put in that time without jeopardizing your grades, which is where it gets a bit confusing, because you don't want to be putting so much time into your admissions test that suddenly your grades are going lower, because then it doesn't matter what your admissions test is, you won't get your grades. So that's where you've got that trade-off, which is really strange. Coming on to what Oxford means to me, which I'll ask it to myself, because me and Abdullah were talking about it today. For me, Oxford is an exciting prospect, but it's not everything. I would be very happy, and I mean this honestly, with any of the 5 universities I'm applying to, Oxford, LSE, UCL, Warwick and King's. Any of those, I would be over the moon to get an offer from, and I would be over the moon to attend. I would attend any of those in a second. Oxford is more for me to see if I can do it. I'd love to be, the person that gets into Oxford and be able to go around the rest of my life saying, yeah, I went to Oxford. But it's not the end game for me. And I'd happily go to any of the other 5 universities with a massive smile on my face, excited for the next stage of my life. And I know other people who for them, if they don't get into Oxford, then they won't go to another university. They'll redo it and they'll have another go. On the open morning at Oxford's, which I went to, the open day, a lot of the students who were touring us around, I asked them how many times did it take you to apply, and they were saying 2 or 3. So a lot of people, you know, I hear the classic phrase, "I've wanted to go to Oxford ever since I was 5." That's not my story at all. I wanted to go to Oxford because I got pretty decent grades and I wanted to see if I can do it. But it's by no means, I'm not going to let that define me. If I don't get into Oxford, of course I'll be sad. Of course I'll be, you know, gutted. Oh, what could I have done better? But it's not going to be like, you know, the end of my world, which is quite a good place to be in, because I see other people kind of, you know, pulling their hair out. And I'm kind of just going into it like, you know, I've got this far. You know, you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So you might as well just have a go. And that's my kind of mindset for Oxford. And I know that differs a little bit, so Abdullah, as he'll share.
Yeah. So for me, I'm not at the end of the spectrum where I would take a gap year if I don't get into Oxford. If I don't get into Oxford, but I get into another university that I've applied to, then I will go to that university. But for me, it's probably a healthier mindset to have, being satisfied completely with any of your universities that you applied to. But for some reason, if I don't get into Oxford, so I've applied to Oxford, and Imperial is the second best one that I've applied to. Imperial is also a fantastic university. But if I don't get into Oxford, because it has lower admissions rates and lower success rates, if I don't get into Oxford, I wouldn't be happy. I would be probably down the line, I'd be happy I got into another university, whether it be Imperial or Manchester or Nottingham that I'm applying to. But it's not Oxford, if that makes sense. Yeah. Something about it. It's just the biggest challenge, and I just really, really want that. But I think you can't apply to Oxford unless you want it, because lots of subjects have admissions tests, and the admissions tests are designed to make you struggle. And I mean, I've been preparing for the PAT, which is the physics aptitude test for engineering, since start of August, but before the start of August. And I'm still nowhere near confident with going into a PAT test.
What kind of scores are you getting on those?
So
on the past papers.
So it's different to the TSA, but the PAT, the scores for the part of the cutoff marks are up and down every single year. Oh, okay. It varies completely depending on how they've designed the test. So each year I have been above the cutoff. So each year I would have got an interview, but I'm not so far above the cutoff that I'm thinking, yeah, okay,
relax.
I'm just above the cutoff. So I'm under a lot of pressure, but I've been preparing since late July, early August. If you don't want Oxford, then you're going to be completely overwhelmed by the admissions test alone, if you have one, and then by the interview process as well. So I think when it comes to applying to Oxbridge, then you need to know early on where you're going, what you want to do, why you want to do it, how much it means to you, how much you're willing to work for it as well. Because if you're not willing to work for it, then, you know, trying 2 to 3 weeks before a mock test for A-level might get you somewhere, but it won't get you anywhere with an admissions test. And the quicker you know what you want to do, why you want to do it, the better. So
I think, kind of to sum up what me and Abdullah said, if you don't want Oxford, you won't get it. It's as simple as that. And it's not by any means me saying that you need to want Oxford. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, actually, I'd be really happy at another university. And that's also not to say that other universities aren't harder. My LSC, the course I'm applying to at LSC, has a 4% success rate, which is a lower percent than Oxford, which obviously sounds a bit weird because obviously Oxford is Oxford. But, you know, there are other universities that are absolutely phenomenal and have even lower success rates. But there is something about Oxford.
I think it's because, for example, in my case, Imperial is actually ranked number 1 in the UK for engineering. So it's actually a better engineering university as of now for me. But because Oxford, for its entire history, has been number 1 in almost anything, it's just something about, it's just got that sort of established prestige in a way. that you want if you want to apply there.
I feel like we're going to annoy a lot of Cambridge graduates.
Yeah,
Listening to this.
Oxbridge. It's Oxbridge, yeah. And I think just, to kind of like round that question off, I think when it starts getting tough, so for example, he said he was just above the cutoff. Right now, I'm just below the cutoff by 1 mark, consistently below the cutoff for TSA. And it's pretty frustrating.
I bet.
Because I look through the paper and I just think, why did I get that wrong? I should have got it right. And
so are they silly mistakes?
It's the time pressure, which is my biggest issue.
Each year they find a new way to exploit your one weakness in a it's just weird.
Yeah.
Something about these tests is just weird.
It has been frustrating. And I know people who have been in a similar position with whatever admission test they need to do for Oxbridge, and they've given up when they've got to that stage. And if you give up at that stage, it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean you're not a determined person. It doesn't mean you're not disciplined, but it just means that you didn't really want it. Those that really want it, like myself, will continue, even though every paper we're getting under it. But I have the confidence. I know I will get above that cutoff point. And, I'm in a different position to Abdullah because I'd be happy with my all 5 unis. Don't mistake that for me saying that I don't want Oxford. Of course I want it. And of course it's in my head, but it's just me being a very optimist, being very optimistic about everything and trusting that life has the right path for me. And if it's not Oxford's, then maybe it's because there's something better around the corner for me. It's something you need to, it's something that only no one can tell you to apply to Oxford. Only if you really, really want it. And the earlier you find that calling, the better.
How do you guys feel about the interview? Let's thought experiment. You've both got above the cutoff. How do you prepare for an Oxford admission interview? What have you heard about it? Have you guys done any research in it? And generally, how are you sort of feeling about it?
So we actually had quite a long conversation on the way here about interviews. We have slightly different mindsets on it. For me, I'm way more nervous about the interview than I am the admissions test, because my whole life I've had good experience with tests. I've had, I like the idea of this is what you need to know, learn it and get good in answering questions, and then you'll be okay with the exam. I've always liked that and I've always been good with that. When it comes to trying to articulate your understanding of a subject to someone asking you questions in a really pressured environment, that's not something I look forward to. So I'm really not looking forward to it in that way. But in terms of preparation, what I've heard is that the best way to prepare is to go through difficult questions. For example, go through a PAT question, an admissions test question, but explain what your thought processes are as you're doing it out loud, because that's how you'll do it in the interview. So occasionally when I do a question that I'm not understanding or I'm struggling with a question, when I'm at home, when I'm not on the exam, so I can speak out loud, I will try and reason it out, because not only will that help your understanding of the question, because it leads you logically through a process that might get you to the right answer, but it will also be useful in the interview because they want to see your understanding. The more practice you have explaining your subject, the better experience you should have in the interview.
So it's almost like role playing out the process of dealing with a question that someone might give you.
So rather than them asking you a question, just read a question on a piece of paper, then explain to yourself out loud what you would need. So in the limited research that I've done, admittedly, there's the questions for the interviews that they ask you for engineering are very, very abstract. They give you no numbers, no details at all. They just said, how would you do this? And from what my brother has told me, having gone through Oxford himself for physics, he said that they want to test your thought processes is in the sense that they want to see where you'd go with it, what you would need for it, and what you would use that for to get some sort of answer that they're looking for. They're not necessarily looking for the right answer, but they're testing how you think and how you adapt your thinking process to what new information they might give you, because they want to see how you respond to teaching. Another point that I think is important is that make sure you know your personal statement well. If you've written a whole bunch of stuff about a book that you've read or a video that you've watched in your personal statement, and then you don't actually know that well, then they ask you that, you have no idea what to say. They think you're lying probably, or just didn't actually care that much. So
AI wrote it. AI wrote the personal statement.
Yeah. So make sure whatever you write on your personal statement, you are familiar with. Recap it before the interview, especially.
So almost like revise your personal statement. Yeah. No, inside
absolutely.
out. And they'll have it in front of them, I'm guessing, and they'll have all. Does anyone know, by the way, how long the interviews are?
I think it's about 20.
For me, it's 40 minutes, I'm pretty sure.
It's a 40-minute interview.
I think they might have multiple, though. I don't actually remember.
Mine is a bit different to how Abdullah's described the engineering one. So, I've done almost zero research because I don't want to let myself get to that stage, because then I feel like I've got an interview, which I obviously have not. So I've kind of just heard from people about what the PPE interview is like. I think for the PPE one, it's kind of critical thinking, and then also, can you defend a stance that you take? So, one of the typical questions which someone told me is, you're the mayor of a town. The town has a massive littering issue. If you made littering, if you put like a fine of death, so you put the death penalty on littering, there would be no littering in that town. Would you do this? So it's really kind of, you have to, so whatever my answer is to it, and I've been thinking about it for ages and I still don't know what I do, but whatever your answer is to it, you've then got to be able to defend it. I've heard the same. I was talking to someone who had a question in his economics, E&M, so economics and management at Oxford. And his question is, what would you do if there was a time machine?
What would you do if there was a time machine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the follow-up question is, how would you sell it? So
interesting.
It's, you've got to answer the question, remember that answer, and then defend when they come at you and tell you you're wrong. That's what I understand. And I think
there's no right answer as well.
Exactly. It's not like they'll say you're wrong because you're not wrong, but they'll introduce something else. So then they'll say, let's say I say, for example, yes, I should have a death penalty. And they'll say, okay, so do you think that the punishment fits the crime if someone drops a bottle and you're killing them? And you've just got to have that kind of confidence to defend it, but then also that mental flexibility to accept different arguments. Opposite to Abdullah, I'm more nervous about the admissions test than the interview, because at school I do a lot of kind of speaking stuff. So I'm confident talking to people, and I'm confident I did a mock like Viva in school, and I got like properly grilled by 3 teachers who were just almost all at the same time shouting me, telling me I was wrong. And I felt like I dealt with it, not 100%, obviously I was in year 12, but I think I dealt with it pretty well. And I think if I get to the interview, I'd feel like I've got a decent chance, but I just, getting to the interview is that's the hard part.
I would say that for me, a big reason also why I don't like the idea of an interview, or not looking forward to it, is because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what they'll ask you. You don't know what you actually need to prepare for. That's a big thing. The worst thing, in my opinion, in tests is when they ask you a question that doesn't have a 100% definite, I know I'm right once you answer this question. For example, some years in the PATs, they like to ask these questions. They'll tell you to sketch a graph. And then in the next part, they'll tell you to sketch another graph. And when you sketch a graph, you don't know for sure if that's going to be the right graph that you've sketched, for example. Because there's not a number that you need to find. There's not one answer that you use information for to get. You try and use what they've given you to create an image, essentially. And that idea of not knowing whether you're right or not knowing whether you have, essentially not knowing whether you're right is what is the worst part about written tests for me. And similarly, in an interview, not knowing whether they'll ask you this or that, and whether you'll be right or wrong, is just not. It's not good.
It's scary.
Yeah, it is quite scary.
Scary to think about.
Well, I think what might be good is maybe we catch up after the test, maybe, because we've talked so much about how because I'm guessing you guys have got about just under a month before the test. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing you'll continue a lot of your work in the next few weeks. And I guess actually those next few weeks are going to be really, really important. I know you said you've been doing it since sort of July or August, but I'm imagining a lot will happen in between now and the test. And I think it'd be also really interesting to talk about the test itself once you've done them. And also, how you dealt with the pressure on the day, because I think that'll be really helpful maybe for people to hear.
If we dealt with the pressure on the
day. Exactly. But I mean, that's the thing though, because about sharing the experience is it didn't go well and here's why, and here's how I would probably do it differently next time might help someone else. And I think sharing that experience is really, really helpful and beneficial to others as well. Just like I'm sure equally, if you were to have a conversation with someone who gave you some really useful advice about the test you've got coming up, you'd appreciate that. So I think if you guys are cool with that, we'll definitely do that. And then who knows, maybe there'll be another podcast where we talk about the interview.
Hopefully.
And I also, what might be interesting is that once you've got the result of the test, it might be interesting to talk then about how the preparation shifts towards the interview. This is all up in the air, but I'm just sort of having an idea, but I think that might be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Have you guys got anything that you'd like to add? Is there anything you think that we haven't covered, or is there anything that you think that you would just like to add to anything before we say goodbye?
I would say the most important thing to summarize is that you know what you're doing in advance. Just make sure you know early on where you want to go, why you want to go there, what you want to do, and what you need to get there. And then you should be okay. The earlier you prepare for tests, for interviews, for admissions tests, for universities, anything, the earlier you prepare for it, the better.
Be prepared earlier.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think, just to kind of summarize the summer, whatever you've just
summarize the summary.
Yeah. I think at A-level, at IB, at an admission test for an interview, it all becomes independent. It's on you. However much work you put in is however much you're going to get out. And that is not the case at GCSE, unfortunately, because if you have a really good teacher, you'll get a good grade, simple as. Mm-hmm. So you need to find that motivation. And yes, of course, you can find that through other people and, tutors, friends, older siblings, people who've gone through that. And you can say, how did you get that motivation? How did you know that university was right for me? But once you find that motivation, don't lose it. And that is your kind of staple point for the long hours of revision you have to do, for the doing a test for the 17th time, even though you failed 16 times before. That's what keeps you going. And yeah, it's on you, unfortunately. Right. It's all on you.
Oh, positive words. It's all on you. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching the podcast or listening along on a streaming service. If you have watched it on YouTube and you did enjoy it or you found something useful, please do subscribe to the channel. Please leave a like, share it with any friends. I think there's been loads of interesting information on university applications and personal statements. Every single person in your year is probably thinking maybe the questions that have maybe been answered. So please do share it with them, because as I kind of said at the end there, if we can share a bit of this experience and help someone who's about to go through it, that's a real benefit to them. And I think sharing information is absolutely the way to go in the world. So thank you so much for watching. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Tanay for coming back, to Abdullah for coming in for the first time. I really hope we get to do this again a couple of weeks or months down the line. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon.